going to go ahead and wrap up table time. I hate to cut you guys off because I know y'all are having such rich conversation. It's been so fun to sit in the back and just watch you guys talk about all the things that God taught us this week, because I know there was so much. But I am going to go ahead and transition us to our teaching for this morning. But we're going to start off with a little bit of a game, an activity, okay? I'm going to put an image on the screen, and I need you guys to tell me what you see, okay? So be loud, be proud, and I'm going to show you an image. Tell me what you see. 3, 2, 1. What do you see? Does anyone see a rabbit? Now do you see the other thing? Once you see the rabbit, you can't unsee that. Okay, you guys got it. Let's see image number 2. Faces. Does anyone see a vase? White vase or 2 faces? Okay, all right. This next one's the hardest. Let's see if you guys can get it. Does anyone see like a young lady turning? Does anyone see an older woman? I'm not. If you can see the younger lady's chin, it's the nose of the old woman. I'm not calling her old. That's what the image is called. I'm sorry. Not being ageist over here. Yes, okay. That one's really tricky. I had to Google it. I could not find the young woman in that picture. These are called ambiguous images. They're images purposefully designed to have 2 images within the same picture. But at first, your eye can only see one image, right? And then you see the other, and you can't unsee it. There's another very controversial one of these that I just like to stir the pot a little bit. Let's put this one on the screen. The dress. What color? Who here sees white and gold? Raise your hands. Okay, the rest of you are wrong, and you can leave. I'm kidding. I don't understand how you see anything different. It's only ever been white and golds. Man, we could honestly have debated this all morning long. All right. Reel it in. It's annoying to me that I can't see what you see when you look at that dress, right? Like, it's frustrating to know that you see a rabbit and I see a duck, and I'm over here like, I know there's a rabbit, but I don't know where it is. It's frustrating to have limited perspective. And yet, I think that's how we walk around in life. We see ourselves, our problems, the world around us with limited, human, finite perspective, lacking the full picture. And it reminds me of this week's memory verse, which hopefully you guys were able to memorize. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Now, I've had the second part of that verse on lock since middle school, when I got a really bad haircut and had braces, and it was like a whole thing I clung to. The Lord looks at my heart, right? It is talking about that, for sure. But I think the Lord this week drew my attention to the first part of that verse. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. The ESV translates it this way: the Lord sees not as man sees. I don't think we're just talking about outward appearance. I think we're talking about perspective. That we are looking at the world one way, and God is looking at the same thing we are looking at, but in an entirely different perspective. From an entirely different viewpoint. He is looking at everything we're looking at, but he's looking at it with eternal perspective. And we're looking at it with our here today, gone tomorrow mentality. So I asked myself this week, if the Lord doesn't look at the things people look at, what are the things that we're looking at that he is not looking at? If you can follow that question there. Turned into quite the list, okay? Turns out we look at a lot of things that I'm not sure God's looking at the same way we are. We do look at our outward appearance. We become obsessed with diet trends and working out, or Botox, or skincare routines, or makeup, what we wear, how we fix our hair. We look at our relationships. We dwell on the fact that we're single and we don't want to be, or we compare our marriage to someone else's, or we compare our friendships and we want to be in that friend group, or we want as many friends as that person seems to have. We look at and compare our material possessions. our houses, our cars, the way our kitchen looks, our kids, our grandkids, and their successes. We compare. You name it, and we are looking at it. We're consumed with planning vacations, our comforts, the TV show we're binge watching, the books we're reading, dreaming up fun weekend plans, or overthinking youth sports. Now, it's not like the list I said is all bad things. That's not it. It's just that the way we look at those things, I don't think is the way God is looking at those things. He is looking at them in an entirely different way, and we lack his perspective. That's why I was so excited for our study this week. David won't always be an example for us to look up to and follow, but this week he is. This week he shows us what it's like to look at the world from God's perspective. See, where the Israelite army saw the size of Goliath, David saw the size of his God. While the Israelite army saw the inexperience of David, David saw his past experiences with God. While the Israelite army focused on their problem, David had the perspective to know whose problem it was. He had God's perspective. And he's going to show us that when we open our eyes and we lean into the perspective God gives us, we get to see God do incredible things. So yeah, today we're talking about David and Goliath, because how can you study David and not talk about David and Goliath? It's a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right on in. Chapter 17, it opens up, and the Philistines and the Israelites are in a battle. They're in a face-off. Okay, the Philistines are on one side of the mountain, the Israelites are on the other, and in the middle, in the valley, every day for 40 days, the Philistine giant comes out and challenges the Israelite army. And every day for 40 days, the Israelites heard Goliath's challenge. And every day for 40 days, they cowered back in fear. Until day 40, and who comes to the scene but David? On assignment from his dad, not coming to fight in the battle, just simply to bring his brothers some food. He's got like a side hustle catering business, apparently. So he comes to bring his brothers food. He goes to talk to them at the battle lines. Let's pick up in the text. As David was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites have been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. Twice the text tells us that the Israelites saw the man, and what they saw terrified them. Throughout this whole entire chapter, we see what they saw. They saw Goliath, the champion. They saw how tall he was, a little over 9 feet tall, which is like 2 Kathys on top of each other. That's pretty tall. He was wearing a lot of bronze armor. It describes it in detail. Some scholars suggest that the weight of his armor alone was 200 pounds. So he's not just tall, he's really strong to be moving around in that. And then finally, he's described as a man of war since his youth. Okay? What they saw led them to stay stuck in fear, paralyzed in inaction for 40 days. Now let's contrast how they saw Goliath with what David saw. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Now David probably noticed how tall and strong Goliath was, but never in the text do we read that. It doesn't even say that David saw Goliath. It said he heard him. He calls him an uncircumcised Philistine who's defying the armies of the living God. Where the Israelites saw this undefeatable giant, David just saw someone attacking God's people. The nerve. David wasn't distracted by his size. He had vision to see how the true enemy was using Goliath's taunts to keep God's people stuck in fear. Which leads me to point number 1. Godly perspective reveals the true enemy. David knew that Goliath's challenge was really a challenge against God. It was a spiritual attack on God's people. The enemy was using Goliath's words to prevent God's people from walking in freedom and living out their identity as God's chosen people. And this is what it looks like to be a man or a woman after God's own heart, to have the perspective to see the spiritual happening among the physical things in your life. And the enemy's tactics have not changed today, have they, ladies? He still uses the tangible physical giants in our lives to pull us off sides. And unfortunately, oftentimes we stay stuck fighting these physical things that we can see and totally ignoring the spiritual battle happening beneath and never really gaining victory because we're fighting the wrong enemy. Priscilla Shirer has a great example of this in her study, Armor of God. She talks about that carnival arcade game Whack-A-Mole. You know the one where the moles come up and you have this hammer mallet thing and you hit them down. What happens? The mole goes into that hole and up another hole. And then you whack him again, he goes down, he comes up again. And you just spend a lot of chaotic energy whacking that mole down, only for him to come back up somewhere else. Her point is that oftentimes we are focused on what we can see, what's right in front of us, the physical problems and situations in our life that are overwhelming to us. And we end up ignoring the true enemy in our lives and what he is after. And we try to fight this spiritual battle with these worldly weapons, and that never works out. All we end up doing is sending the mole down, only for him to come up in some other place in our life. I want to ask you guys, what does your battle look like right now? What's your giant? Is it your mother-in-law and the comments that she makes? Is it the resentment that you feel towards your husband? Is it the conflict you're in with your friend or your roommate? Is it the boss that you don't think respects you? Is it your kids who don't listen to you? The person in your life group that would just get their act together? Is it the situation at work that seems impossible? The diagnosis? The person on Facebook posting too many comments? What is your giant? I'll tell you what it's not. It's not the enemy. The people and the situations that you're facing, they are not the enemy. The person who hurts you most or annoys you most in this world, they're not your enemy. The enemy is the enemy. The enemy who is trying to steal, kill, and destroy you. He is the true enemy in your life. He wants you to vilify people, to turn them into the villain so that you waste a lot of time and effort and energy whack-a-moling other people and never facing the real battle going on beneath the surface. It reminds me of Ephesians 6. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, aka what you can see. That's not our struggle, but it's against the rulers, the powers, the world forces of this darkness, and the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. His goal is to keep us focused on what we can see so that we stay enslaved to sin and fear and insecurity. Literally, as I was in the middle of writing this particular point, I had to pause and go be a mom and make breakfast. I was writing last week in the morning. And as I start cracking the eggs, making breakfast, my husband comes in and he asks a very innocent question. But I guess there was something underneath the surface I didn't know. So I responded, I don't know, a little short, a little ungraciously. And he must have picked up on that because then he responded a little short. And all of a sudden it's 6:45 and we're kind of in a little tiff. And I'm like, what is going on? And so he leaves the room and I start whisking my eggs and stewing. Of course this would happen. Of course he'd pick a fight in the morning. I wasn't trying to. Couldn't you just be gracious and understand? He doesn't understand all the things I do for us. I never feel appreciated. I mean, on and on and on for 3 minutes, okay? I got caught up until I remembered the words I had literally just typed on my paper. Matt is not the enemy. The enemy is the enemy. The enemy who's trying to steal, kill, and destroy me is also trying to destroy my marriage and my life. So, of course, he is trying to start a conflict with my husband in the morning. That's going to build up a lot of resentment in my heart. That then's going to, feed off, and my kids are going to notice it, and they're going to go to school anxious. Of course, he is trying to do that. And the way I was trying to fight him, it wasn't really working out, right? I lacked vision to see the true enemy. I fell prey to his schemes, and I tried fighting this Goliath in my life with just a lot of passive-aggressive sighs and some resentful thoughts. And did that help anyone? No. I missed what the real enemy was doing, and I fought the wrong enemy. Human perspective is limited and it's flawed. But like David, when we can have godly perspective and see things the way God sees them, we can attack the true enemy. Because we can remember that the enemy has already been defeated. The only enemy you will ever face in your life has already been defeated. The only battle you will fight in your life has already been won. When we have God's perspective to see the enemy for who he truly is, defeated, then we can walk into battle with confidence. For me, it just looked like praying in that moment and saying, God, Matt's not the enemy. I rebuke Satan and what he's after, and I pray for peace and reconciliation. Matt walked in, I apologized. 5 minutes later, everything is good. Because God gave me eyes to see the true enemy. He gave me the weapons then I needed to fight him back. So let's go on. Now that we know how David is seeing Goliath, let's see what happens when he turns to begin to fight with him. Because he begins to toy with this idea of fighting Goliath. He brings it up to the men around him and eventually to Saul, but he's not met with a lot of confidence, is he? Nope. Especially from his brother. Like, what's up with that, Eliab? Okay, his own brother says, I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. That's some shame-inducing language. That is not okay. If I were David right then, I don't know, I might would have started another battle, okay? We might not would have ever made it to Goliath because I would have been fighting my brother. But David didn't do that. So he then gets in front of Saul, and what does Saul say to him? He says, you can't go fight this Philistine. You are a young man. He's been a warrior from youth. Throughout chapter 16 and 17, we read how people saw David. And what did they see? He was the youngest of 8 brothers. He was a shepherd who abandons his sheep. Did y'all point out that Eliab said that to him too? It was rude. He was a harpist. Harpists don't really give off warrior imagery, you know? That's not who I want charged in the front lines of battle. He's not old enough or big enough for battle. Like, he didn't go there to fight. He went there to bring them charcuterie. Like, that is who David is. He has a wicked heart. He's but a youth. He's inexperienced. Saul tries to put a ton of his armor on him. Goliath disdains him and mocks him. He's youthful. That's how they see David. If I'm him, I'm like, you're right. I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry. But thankfully, David did not see himself the way other people saw him. He had God's perspective to see himself the way God saw him. And this leads me to point number 2. Godly perspective reveals your true self. God-like vision gives you the ability to see the identity that God gave you. So how does David see himself? He says to Saul, the king, he pushes back. He says, your servant's been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off the sheep, I went after it, I struck it, and I rescued this sheep. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. David knew who he was. Those years as a shepherd were not wasted. God used them to train him for this very moment. You see, the battle with Goliath wasn't the only battle that David faced that day. The taunts and accusations and questions that he heard from those around him, including his own family, were tactics from the enemy, used to provoke doubt and fear and shame in David. The enemy's goal was to keep David insecure so that he didn't go forward in battle. The enemy's like, well, maybe you're not afraid of facing Goliath, but you sure might be afraid of what people think of you. Man, how often does he do this to us? Oftentimes the voice of the enemy is loudest in our own head, especially as women. We say things to ourselves all the time. I can't do that. I'm not qualified enough. I don't know enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. She's better. They can do it. How many times do we keep ourselves from what God is asking us to do? Because we doubt ourselves along the way. We let the enemy tell us who we are rather than let God prove who he made us to be. God made us his beloved daughters, made in his image, fearfully and wonderfully righteous, holy, set apart, chosen and accepted, free, no longer bound by our sin, created on purpose for a purpose. What would happen if we saw ourselves the way God sees us? What giants might we be able to slay? I read a commentary that said that this was the moment when the battle against Goliath was won. When David had the perspective to remember who God made him to be and how he was prepared for that battle, he could walk forward in faith, ready to meet Goliath. When we see ourselves the way God sees us, we can walk forward in confidence because we know we're not facing them alone. Let's go ahead and wrap up our story today. So Saul, he tries to send David to battle with all his armor, and David's like, nope, haven't trusted that. Have tested my stones, though. So he grabs 5 stones and a slingshot and goes to face a massive giant. After Goliath taunts him one last time, David says this, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Whew, it's quite the battle cry. Could have used a little bit less details about the carcasses though, David, but that's okay. I love this because of what it reveals. The battle is not ours to win. It's God's. And this leads me to point number 3. Godly perspective reveals who is fighting for you. And this is really refreshing. It is a reminder we need because the battle we are overwhelmed by, it's not ours to win. It's God's. So often as women, we think, man, if I can just control it all, if I can just hold everything together, if I can manage and work and strive and perform and do all these things, then it will all work out. But all that holding on tightly does is just make us more stressed out and anxious and overwhelmed. David saw the battle for what it was, not his to win, and that took the pressure off. There's this confidence that comes from knowing it's not dependent on you, that God's just going to have to show up and do the hard work. Our role isn't to go to battle and to do it in our own strength and in our own power. Our job is just to take the step forward in faith and release it to God and let him do what only he can do, surrendering the outcome to him. What's also important to point out here is how David fought Goliath. He says, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Even though Saul tried to give him all the weapons and put his heavy armor on him, David knew those weapons wouldn't work for him. He didn't show up to fight Goliath with worldly weapons and dressed in worldly armor. David fought Goliath with a stone and a slingshot so that no one watching the battle in that moment or reading about it for years and years and years to come would ever for a minute think that David was the hero of the story, because he's not. He did not win that battle. God won it. There is no way on earth a teenage boy with a slingshot could have overpowered Goliath, if not for God. David fought in this way so that we would know without a shadow of a doubt who won this battle. And it reveals the most important weapon we can fight with: dependence on God. The battle was won because he did not fight it the way everyone else would have. He had God's perspective to know that these worldly weapons wouldn't work. He won the battle because he relied on God to fight for him. How often do you fight with worldly weapons? Maybe it's trying to problem solve and getting into fix-it mode, nonstop thinking, analyzing, worrying, planning, striving. Maybe it's a sin, gossiping about the problem, acting out in anger about a situation. Maybe you just try to ignore the battle. You distract yourself from it. You numb out. You scroll. You turn to a vice like drinking or shopping. These weapons will never work. It's just another version of whack-a-mole. The only way we can have victory in our battles is if we don't fight them, is if we just let God fight for us. And we fight with the weapon of dependence, trusting God to deliver us. And if dependence is a word you don't understand, it just means asking God for help. That's how we fight our battles, is we pray and we say, God, I need you to do for me what I cannot do for myself. We worship, we praise, we confess, we turn to our community, we turn to the word. This is how the battle is won, depending on God to fight it for us. We need to have eyes to see the battle, how it truly is. We need to see it the way David did, and we need to fight the battle not with worldly weapons, but with the weapon of dependence, trusting God to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. So to summarize this morning, the Israelites were unable to see a way out of their current situation, right? Because they could not see the enemy for who he truly was. They couldn't see themselves for who God had made them to be. And they couldn't see that the battle was the Lord's. But David, he came and he saw the same thing, but from an entirely different perspective. He knew that the enemy could be defeated because he knew who he truly was. He knew who God had made him to be, and he knew that the battle was God's. He had a different perspective, a perspective that can be ours too, if we ask God for it. And so we're just going to turn our last few minutes today to ask God for this godly perspective, because we cannot make it up on our own, right? That's not going to work. We need to depend on God to give us his eyes and his vision to see our worlds how they truly are. So if you would just get in a comfortable position, and I'll lead you through a guided prayer for our last few minutes together this morning. I want you to ask God or to think of the giant that you're currently facing. Maybe it's a difficult situation or a difficult person, but what is your Goliath? Now, I want you to ask God if you have vilified anyone in this situation, if you've made them out to be the enemy. Ask him to reveal that to you. Next, I want you to ask God to give you his vision for who the true enemy is in that situation. Ask him to reveal what the enemy is doing in you and in that situation, and I want you to pray against it. I want you to ask God if you're seeing yourself rightly. Ask God to remind you who he made you to be, especially in this specific situation. How does he want you to show up? And then finally, we need to surrender this to the Lord. So if you would just open your hands and right now let go of that giant in your life, that situation that feels impossible, or that person that feels impossible. God, we give you these things that we're facing because it's yours. It's your giant, God. It's your problem. We surrender them to you, Lord, and we ask for your perspective to see our true enemy rightly, to see ourselves rightly, God, and to rely on you to do the hard work for us. God, we give you this situation. We ask that you would get the glory from it, that it wouldn't be about anything we're bringing to the table, but only about you, God. Would you just give us an opportunity to watch you deliver us? We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thank y'all for being here today. We love you. We're grateful for you. We'll see you next week. If you wouldn't mind just taking all your pretty stuff off your table and bringing it to the back. That's it. Y'all have a great week.